Hello, my name is Tyler Bartlett, and I will be talking about George Washington's leadership, first cabinet, and farewell address. The first cabinet consisted of George Washington plus 4 men that were consultants and colleagues of our first president. The 4 men that supported George Washington were Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, Henry Knox, and Edmund Randolph. The 4 members of the cabinet all had a specific responsibility in order to keep their country running smoothly. Thomas Jefferson was appointed by Washington to be the first state secretary, and he led the U.S. Department of State, which advises the president and heads the country in foreign policy issues. Alexander Hamilton was chosen to serve as the first Treasury Secretary by George Washington. Something many people may not know is that Hamilton was actually George Washington's second choice after Robert Morris, who declined the position, recommending Hamilton instead. Hamilton was then in charge of the financial and monetary matters. Before the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, Henry Knox served as the Continental War Secretary and was then appointed by Washington as the first Secretary of War. His job as the Secretary of War was to be responsible for all military affairs while leading the War Department. Edmund Randolph was chosen to be the first Attorney General after being Washington's personal assistant in the military, whose new job as Attorney General was to be the chief lawyer of the U.S. government and to be concerned with legal affairs. The first cabinet was extremely important for the government for so many reasons. George Washington, being the first president, needed a lot of help and backup running the country. Having 4 eligible men to help him with this new government were definitely needed. The 4 men in the first cabinet regularly met with Washington to address issues of importance and discuss how each department's work was doing. Relating to current events, Donald Trump recently chose and publicly declared his cabinet members as he was inaugurated just 7 days ago. Just like when George Washington was elected as the first president, he chose his men in the cabinet that he thought would help him successfully run the country. George Washington was evidently the right guy for the job, being that he was unanimously voted for, which shows that he had demonstrated the leadership skills necessary to lead his country. As a general, he had to have been a good leader in order to lead his men safely to victory. He brought that leadership into office when he stepped in as president and had the weight of the country on his shoulders. He led our country in the right direction by making necessary decisions in order to keep our country safe and on the right path, just like he did with his men in the battlefield. George Washington set some precedents that have set the stage for our country and presidents. It was his idea to have a cabinet of a few men to back him up and support him while running the entire country. He also established that each president elected would serve 2 terms after he stepped down before a 3rd term. If George Washington were to run for a 3rd term and won, he could have possibly kept running and leading the country till he died. The reason England is one of our strongest allies is because Washington established a good affair with Great Britain thanks to Jay's Treaty. These are just a few of the many precedents set by our first president. George Washington wrote a 32-page farewell address before leaving office discussing the importance for America to be warned about a few things. First, he warned Americans to stay away from excessive devotion to a political party and to be unified as a country instead of being separated by land or depending on where you live. Also, he encouraged the U.S. not to be too engaged in foreign alliances. America's response can be shown throughout history and where we are today. Back then, political parties and alliances with other countries still continued to be formed. Today, political parties thrive and have much impact on elections and the way people get along. Also, people tend to judge someone by where they say they live. In conclusion, George Washington was a strong leader with an intelligent cabinet of men that led our country to greatness and set an example for future generations to follow.